Just wanted to put out a promo video to promote the live stream tonight at 6 p.m. Arizona time. And also talk about sales. Um, if you go through all the videos, I'm sure there's a sales video that I made. And uh, what's the word? Okay, so some of this is a little pet peeve. Some of this is mostly so that there can be a better treatment of one another when doing business dealings. And just to be very clear, just because you do business dealings or deals or whatever you want to call it does not mean you're engaging in commerce. That's a whole other conversation that I don't really want to have right now. But just be aware that whenever you're involved in commerce, that involves police, that involves the government. They have a monopoly on commerce. So you may or may not want to involve yourself in commerce. Now, commerce is for um, typically a business that has asked permission, or an entity that has asked permission from the state to exist. And you can do this in the form of an S corp or an LLC. And basically the government wants their piece of that because they granted you the permission for that thing to live. So there are other ways to function and do the business of your life and provide services and things like that than committing commerce. So there are other things that you can use, such as trusts, to operate a business, especially a family business, and keep it out of the realm, keep it private, and out of the grubby fingers of the government and their police force. Does that make sense? And I don't like talking about this, mostly because a lot of people who, I don't want to say are dumb, but just don't give a shit. They're like, I want the speaker stuff, Patrick. That's all I want. And I go, I understand that, but in order for things to function properly, it's important for education. And that's what this channel and that's what Robot is all about. It's not even about audio stuff. It's about education. And some of it is sharing my journey. But other parts is I learned to be the man, the human that I wanted to see in the world. And these are some of the things that I wish somebody had sat me down and talked to me about. So I'll start with the pet peeve. The pet peeve was I'm looking for quick flip deals on either OfferUp or Facebook. Again, because those are the two main free platforms. Always look for a free platform, or I think there can be something in between that and versus a commerce website or a large commerce marketplace like eBay. And the reason why I call those eBay is a commerce website is because they collect sales tax. They shouldn't. They shouldn't. They shouldn't be collecting sales tax, but they do, and the state loves that. And so there's a huge sort of bias on the behalf of the state to use things like Shopify and eBay and other commerce-related products. So, but anyways, the pet peeve was there was a guy selling a SCAR. I think it was either an SDR or the SVR 10 in a ported box for $80, which is a really good deal. You could probably easily flip that for 150, especially if you have an amp to sell with it. For like then you're up to 200, 220, and then if you're going to add installation to it, again, you want to be just below market price so that you're competitive. And you can just call up one or two shops and ask, say, hey, I have this subwoofer. How much is it to install? And they're going to charge you $100 for the kit, plus another at least 100, if not 200, to install that wire and the subwoofer. So, and right now, the pricing for a lot of that stuff is very high. And people are starting to lose patience with the market. They're like, fuck. We were in Tucson last night running errands, and I was like, hey, babe, you want to stop at McDonald's to get some ice cream? She's like, yeah. And their ice cream machine actually worked. And I was like, let's get 2 hot fudge sundaes. And usually those are about $2. $4, $3.99 each. But I was like, Sherry, she was like, honey, we can just leave. And I was like, no, 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 no. I was like, I'm rich, bitch. I'm going to spend this money on you. And I went and paid it anyway. But I definitely remember that. And McDonald's is there to make a profit. They're not there to feed you. They're there to make a profit. And so, and they've made that very clear. So, and the reason why I tell you that is so that you are aware that there are some humans that are there to help you and care about you. And typically it's not in a fancy package. It doesn't have a marketing budget. It's just a good human wanting to provide you a quality service or, some sort of sharing. It's almost communal, as in, you can, it can be communism and also commerce. So I've been studying word roots lately, Latin and Greek word roots. But anyways, the pet peeve is the guy was selling this deal for $80 and he was getting a lot of hits on that. And at the time he was out of town and he responded in his sweet time. Basically, I think he priced it low on purpose so that he could get a lot of hits and then he could be choosy about his buyer and maybe even get more out of it. And he contacted me back and said, "Hey, I'm only available during the week." And I was like, "Well, that's fine because I do this full time." And but then he raised his price $10, and I got, I don't want to say I got upset, but I was what's the word? I was not impressed by his business skills or dealing skills, the way that people negotiate. And it's his right to do that. If he thinks that it's underpriced, by all means, get that extra $10. The problem is that what he did was he put out an offer, and then he didn't keep his word. And so that, I think, is more important than the $10. But for a lot of, especially young people, and I think, and that's why I'm making this video, because I think a lot of it just has to do with lack of experience and what's the word? People that are uneducated don't realize how powerful and important their integrity is. And now your integrity is how much of your words match your actions. So if you look at the definition of Webster's dictionary definition of integrity, it's a sense and a feeling of being whole, of being complete, right? And that we know comes from doing good deeds and letting your words become flesh, as the Bible says. And what that means is if I say I'm going to give you, this, this is a dragon, what is this, a lion? I don't know, whatever it is. For $5, I don't raise the price at the very end, because that puts me out of integrity. And what it does is it erodes trust in the marketplace. And a lot of people, they don't know you from any other provider, vendor, whatever you want to call yourselves. I think vendor is a commerce term. That's why I don't like to use it. But service provider. And people are upset by this. So don't do that in the marketplace. Is it illegal? No. But it erodes confidence in the marketplace, and it erodes. It's also very annoying to a lot of people. So, if you play one of those fight games like Call of Duty or something like that, you can be the guy that goes around knifing everybody. It's not, a lot of guys don't like that because it's sort of like a suicidal, unfair advantage. But you can do it, right? And so it becomes one of these things that, just like in commerce, you can raise your price at the last second, and you can try to get somebody to, have a bidding war for something. The problem is what is your reputation after that? What did you really gain? And was the gain worth your reputation? And so there's that pet peeve. So when you put something out in a marketplace, if you realize that you have something more valuable than you think it is, ask yourself, is it worth your integrity to reprice? Now, if you have a whole bunch of stuff, it might be in your best interest to find a different equilibrium, a different balance, a different price, again, to what the market will bear. So, and price is always determined by the market. It's not determined by you. Even though, like, if you're an ultra rich person, then you fudge the market and you create this scarcity and demand that doesn't really exist, but because you're greedy and a piece of shit, then you manipulate the market. I'm talking about just dealings with other humans on a very local scale. So again, be the service provider, or again, I don't want to use the word merchant. We'll just say service provider. Even though I'm sure that commerce has consumed that word as well. But just don't be a dick. I think that's the end part. If you put this out there for $5, sell it for $5. You didn't get it for $5, and you would have accepted $5, right? Then sell it for $5. Now, some people, what's funny is these same people that are, again, most of these are just young men that are inexperienced, selfish, and they're basically children. Sometimes get mad if someone else is making money off this. And in prison, I saw this a lot, which was that Arizona, I don't want to say outlawed, but discontinued the practice of selling tobacco products in prison lately. And so there was a guy that our houses were across from one another. That's another word for your bunk, is your house. But anyways, he saw an opportunity in the market, and he had the money to spring on it. And so what he did was it's called a pouch, and it's like a little bag of tobacco. And then, you can roll your own cigarettes with it. And so he found a guy that had 20 pouches, and a pouch from commissary, from basically the government, ran about, I think, like less than that, about $4. And you could roll about 50 to 55 cigarettes with that. So that's a really good deal when you compare to all the taxes and bullshit that's on, like, if you go to the convenience store and buy cigarettes. So, and again, this is the state adjusting its pricing. They want to make more money off the inmates. And so you get rid of tobacco, and then you make it contraband, so that then you can keep people in prison longer and make more money. And then you feed them vapes, and you make more money on the vapes. The margin is better, and there's less shipping. There's a bunch of other benefits. We'll get into that later. So, anyways, there's somebody that was holding, and this is typically somebody like that is called a store, and they basically run like what would appear as a small business, and basically what they are is a service provider to their area, where they stock items and then sell them at a profit. And the guy bought the pouches directly from the commissary for about $4 each. My neighbor said, "Hey man, I will give you $10 a pouch if I buy out all the rest of your pouches," which was 20 pouches. And so So 20 pouches at $10 each, that's $200. So he gave him $200, and the guy was happy at first. Then when he found out that the guy was taking that $10 pouch now and selling it for $25, and he was getting it. And what's funny is the markup actually, if you have someone or you roll the cigarettes yourself and then sell them for $2, $3 each, your margin is way bigger, but you end up dealing with retail sales versus doing what I told him. I told him, and he's a former drug dealer, and so he knows about distribution and things like that. And I said, no, man, just do the wholesale part and then maybe keep a pouch or two for yourself so that you can roll your own cigarettes. And he ended up not keeping a pouch, and so then he was jonesing. But again, he was filthy rich because he turned a $10 pouch into a $25 pouch and then walked away. But that's really that's one method of doing that. But the guy that sold him the pouches originally, the 20 pouches, he felt ripped off. And it was like, but my neighbor was the one that was in a better position, meaning that he was more popular for being a deal broker versus being a store. He wasn't like an official store. And I don't want to get into prison commerce practices, but there are things called official stores. And it used to be, it's not so much anymore, but it used to be that you would kick up a certain percentage, like a rent or a tax, to whatever club that you belong to. So if you were my skin color, you would kick it up to the Brotherhood, and then they were supposed to kick that up to the basically the biker gangs on the outside. And there was a big drama. This was years ago. They found out that the guys that were supposed to be kicking it up to the biker gang were just keeping it and hosing everybody. So that's why anytime there's a scheme like that, like especially if it's sponsored by the government, where the government, says, hey, if you're going to have a store, we want 10%, we want our tithe. They're supposed to provide services for that. That's what they're supposed to be using the 10% for, but that's not what they do. They pocket it, and then they scam the system and make themselves rich. And then they build a light rail in your fucking community that nobody uses except for the homeless. And then they plaster it with propaganda to make you want to go to a school like ASU that's overpriced and doesn't do what you think it does. That's just an example that we saw last night when we were running errands. But so anyways, don't get mad when you sell at your price. Don't have regrets that, I sold myself. Like a lot of people feel like that way when they sell like a stock or they sell their house or something like that. Let that go. Move on to the next deal. Don't think about it. If you find a bar of gold or whatever, if you're Mormon, you find gold plates in the forest. You can easily sell that at spot price. All right, and spot price is the commonly known, publicly known price of an item, and you're dealing with commodities like gold, silver, copper, cotton, those sorts of things, stuff that are always being consumed. There's typically a spot price, meaning that's the agreed price upon the market, of which typically you can sell your commodity really quick at that price. And then there's also I forget what it's called. I don't want to get into stocks and bonds and stuff like that, but basically there's an ask price where the people that are selling it are asking typically higher than spot price. So if your spot price, let's say for silver, is $35 an ounce, and your asking price is $36, you may or may not get that. So, but you can ask. So, but let's see, what else I want to cover? So, if you find a whatever, like silver plates or silver, like a bar of gold, we won't bash on the Mormons too much. If you find a bar of gold in the desert, you can go sell that at spot price. Now, the difficulty of selling a bar of gold, literally, is that typically most people do not have the fundage in order to pay for that at spot price. And so you either have to use I don't want to say black market, I want to say a private market. Typically, when you sell like that, you will sell below spot price. And my advice is to be okay with that. So if you find let's go back to silver. So if you find a bunch of silver, they're like little chips, little ingots. It's not a government chunk of silver like a silver dollar, but like some mining corporation made a bunch of little promotional, motorcycles that are made out of, silver, and each one weighs an ounce. And you find those out in the desert, and you're selling them, and spot price is $35. An easy way to get those sold quickly is to sell them below market price. And don't get mad that you sold below market price, because that was your selling price. Always think about what your in price was, right? You just found it while you were out in the boonies jacking off to some pornography that you shoplifted from a Circle K. And you just happen to stumble across a whole bunch of these silver, trinkets that happen to be real silver and were worth some money. So always think about what you have into it versus what you're selling at. Don't try to bilk the market for the most, because when you start playing that game, you're then playing a different game about greed and manipulation and things like that. I'm not saying that you can't, right? I'm not saying that you can't go knife everybody in the Call of Duty, but what ends up happening is you play a different game of cutthroat. And there are always some other psycho that is more cutthroat than you are. And so I don't recommend getting into that game. I recommend being very passive, very light touch. Just, again, trying to provide a service and be honest as possible, as much as possible. You can, of course, omit things. Like you don't have to tell somebody spot price or whatever, and you can allow the market to decide what they want to pay, and because again, the market is the chief. So I'll give you two examples, which was one when I was high-fiving everybody before the recession of 08, 09. I was driving a brand new Tundra Crew Max. My payment was like $880 a month, but it was 0% financing. And the recession happened, and then, the money feeding that dried up. And so I didn't make the payments that I was supposed to, that I had agreed to do. And I looked at what I thought was spot price, market price, which was provided by Kelley Blue Book. And I owed, I think, 20 on it. Original price was $50,000. In the years that I had it, I'd made double payments. I did all kinds of stuff to pay it off early, which was dumb because it was 0% financing. But again, I was celebrating my youth. I was celebrating having lots of money, and it was fun for me. So, but when times fell hard, I looked at Kelley Blue Book. Kelley Blue Book was, I think, 22, and then I owed 20 on it. And so I didn't really push to sell it. I didn't really want to sell it, but it ended up getting towed because it was raining one night, and I parked it in the yard instead of behind the gate. And the mean old tow truck repo guy came and grabbed it. Now, what I didn't know was that market price on a vehicle like that was $35,000. $35,000. So I could have walked away with a nice check for about 15 grand profit, and had kept my promise with Toyota financing. And instead, it went to auction. It sold for 27, and then Toyota actually cut a check to me for 2 grand. So again, that's a missed opportunity that I didn't do my market research, that I wasn't proactive about my finances. And to me, it's a lesson learned about keeping your promise and doing your best to negotiate and find some other solution. So I lost out on that deal. But I learned a lot. And what was funny was when we bought this car from Toyota, the salesman tried to beat me up, not literally, just figuratively, about that, we had filed for bankruptcy, and then also that the account went into repossession with Toyota financing. And so I quickly corrected him. And I said, Toyota was made whole. I said, in fact, you guys cut me a check for $2,000. Don't give me that crap. And again, I don't want to get into right now into about car sales and about how crooked that is. But let's just say that they approved us, and we have the car that we have now. So, but that was one thing about educating yourself, and also figuring out what kind of role you want to play in the market. Now, when you start to get desperate and stuff like that, I can understand why people do what they do. I still don't agree with it, and I still don't agree with what I did. But again, I'm trying my best to share this with you. Number one, to be transparent. Number two, to educate you guys on something that you can do in your own lives to, again, walk away with integrity, walk away with honor, and again, nobody's getting out of this thing alive. Right? This thing called life. So nobody's getting out of this alive, but you can choose how you want to present yourself, and how you want to die. And anyway, I get off onto a tangent and stuff like that. But the second one, let's see, was this one. So we had over $1,000 currency value of pennies that we had collected when the market was low. And I was studying Robert Kiyosaki and Rich Dad, Poor Dad, which is his book. And one of the things that I decided to do as like a fun hobby with Sherry was collect the copper pennies out of circulation, which the crossover year for pennies was 1982. Half the year they made them out of copper, and then that's the year they switched. So if you find a 1982 penny, you can weigh it, and the lighter one, which is made of zinc, that one's like useless. I mean, you can just sell it for for the penny that it's valued at. Now a copper one, that one gets interesting because right now spot price for copper is like $4.50, $4.60. So all of a sudden, a copper penny carries more value because of the copper value than it does on the face value. That's what it's called, face value. And this occurs as well in other commodity markets, gold coins, silver coins, things like that. And so for some reason, I don't know how I got them or whatever it was, but they were basically, it was what's called bar stock, which is just it was about a 1/4 inch thick. It was about 2 inches wide, and it was just a chunk of copper that somebody had then, I think it was stamped or engraved. I put a picture of one on Instagram, and I thought this was a genius marketing ploy because what they did was they just took bar stock that you can buy from the copper factory, China, whoever, whatever, and they stamped on there some sort of official looking head, like it was a Native American's head, or it was meant to resemble the the authority that the government has whenever they stamp something, like Abraham Lincoln's head or something like that. And you can actually, you can do that. They don't have the market on that idea. Now they might have a copyright on the art. So chances are you don't want to copy the art exactly. You want it to be about 10% different. Excuse me. But somebody had stamped that on this bar stock that they had just cut into whatever increments, and each one was labeled as a ½ pound. And at spot price, I had probably paid about $2 each for them. And I'd done them in a trade or something like that years ago. And These things were going for $25 each. And so that's way beyond spot price. And what was really funny was I saw the average price of being about $25, but I'm a bargain hunter. And so I hunted for the best bargain. And the best bargain that I found was on Etsy. And it was about $14 a bar. And that was $14 shipped for a half pound of copper, which is, again, is still way more than spot price. So spot price, we'll just say is $4.50. And so a half pound would go for about $2.25. And so that is spot price. But I posted those for $14 each. I had one guy overpay, and he gave me another $10 on top of that for delivery. I just happened to be in the Phoenix area. He only bought 4, and I sold 4 then for $70. And then there was another 7 that I sold for $100. And so, of course, I made more money off the other guy. But again, I have nothing virtually into them. Not only did I get them at spot or below spot at the time, but I probably did audio trades. So there was a margin built into the value that I created when I made the speaker or the subwoofer. So my tip for you guys, and that's what I keep telling you on these videos, is I think the biggest thing that I'm telling you is to be patient. Take your time. Don't be in a rush. Don't be a dick. If you're posting this for $5, sell it for $5. Move on. Do something else. If you come across a whole stash of them, then you can start to experiment with price and see what the market will bear. But mostly what I'm telling you to do is to keep your word and be a known as a good guy in the marketplace. So, and if you notice, that's what I've done with Robot. Is I wanted to create a, for lack of a better word, a safe space for you guys to learn and for me to kind of reveal how violent and cutthroat and, deceivious, I think that's the word, I'm not sure, of this particular industry, of the audio industry. So, and I also complete the other goal of the church, which is to help people become financially independent so they don't have to go to a job, especially one that they hate. They don't have to commute. They don't have to pay for childcare, the expense of childcare, and take that on as a burden as well. They can stay home with their families. And that's really what we're looking to do as a church. Little side story. Last night I picked up some motors from the audio legend Curtis Navarro that he had grabbed out of a giant pile of motors that I found out that Jack didn't want, and it was before Chris showed up to get all the scrap, and he helped me with this, and it was a good deal, but God damn it, I fucking forgot. Hang on real quick. I can't remember the thought, but that's fine. There's other thoughts that I can talk about, which was that Curtis is a really interesting, good guy. He offered the motors to me for nothing. He's like, just come pick them up. He's like, if it helps you make money and get back on your feet, go for it. He didn't want anything for that. And that to me tells me that he values my friendship and also just me as a human more than the money. And I cannot tell you how many times that those kinds of relationships are so much more valuable than stupid money. And again, that's the sort of thing that I want to teach you guys with Robot is what you can do is there's a way to live where you collect the junk, right? To somebody that makes a lot of money, this is all junk. You can collect the junk and still make a living. And what you gain is your autonomy. You get back your time. Anytime you think about being an employee relationship with the employer, that's a master-slave relationship. So anytime you hear the word employee, always think slave, because that's a more accurate description of what you're doing. or indentured servant, or better yet, optional servant. It's not even a contract. It's more like a asking the master if you can exist and get paid every week or every 2 weeks or whatever it is. That's more of what the relationship is when you're an employee. You have no real standing. You take the abuse and the money of what the master gives you, and be happy about it. And so, and I actually recommend being very happy and grateful for those sorts of things, because you could definitely be worse off. Now, for me, I saw this abuse over the years in all the jobs, and then later contracts, work contracts that I was completing, and I didn't want to do that anymore. And I was searching for a way to get out of that, and that's where I came across. And again, I was a dumpster diver, because again, how much free money do you want? And I felt like dumpster diving helped me support a lifestyle that I really wanted to live, which was being home with my family, and then also helping other people. And then third, coming across all kinds of cool stuff that again I got for free. So it didn't really matter what I sold it for. It was a moneymaker. So, but that was a neat thing to do last night, and I picked up a bunch of motors from him, and I'm actually going to build them for JL Audio. Well, they're 8-inch subwoofers. They're going to be using the 10W7 motor, and yeah, that was a nice thing that he wanted for his vehicle, because he had one of the big 18s that I built for him, and he wanted to try something with small drivers, because especially at the time the 8s were really expensive and going for a lot of money, and they were mostly just fart machines. And so I kind of want to build a nice SQ subwoofer, 8-inch, using materials that normally ask for exotic prices in the market. Because again, if you look at, and I'll do a whole video on this as well, on like the 10W7 motor. 10W7 goes for $1,000. It's $1,000 for something that costs about $50 to manufacture. To me, that's kind of insane. And so I think it's great to be able to make something out of that, because once it's dead, JL wants you to buy a new one. And I don't agree with that. So I take things into my own hands, and I do my best to create a solution that I can live with. And then what I found out was that there's a big chunk of the market that is okay with living with that stuff too. So I can't tell you how many conversions I've done with the 12W7 motor, especially, and the 13W7 motor. And I've created products and ideas in the marketplace that are not only feel good to me to express them, but it's a big fuck you to the, I don't want to say capitalism, but the scourge of greed that you see with a lot of these companies. The top one being, of course, JL Audio. And it's not that I want to take the company down, because having them exist actually gives me a reference to always undercut them. And that's what I really, really like. So for rich people, go buy JL Audio. That's fine. But when you need a recone and you don't like that they want you to buy another $1,300, $1,800 driver, come see me and see what kind of solutions we can come up with. See, and so that kind of niche, that kind of portion of the market, I think needs to be addressed. But the only way that I can address it, or I should say the most effective way that I can address it, is to come up with my own products, which is a variation of theirs. Now, I don't have the money to go and tool up cones and soft parts to make exact replicas, which you can do now, because all their patents are expired, 20-year patents. So don't be surprised if you see a redesign pretty soon by the new owners, which is Garmin. So don't be surprised if you see a retool on a lot of their products. That's still not going to stop me from bringing, again, high quality things into this country that are as good or better than what they offer at a much more reasonable price. And again, I want to bring in products that are more flexible in the market and also allow you to then put on your designer pants and design some woofers for what you need at a budget that you like. So let's see if there. I think that was a little bit of that was sales. Mostly, do your best to keep your word. I don't want to say absolutely keep your word, because then what happens is you box yourself into a lot of problems. And what I figured out was that because it wasn't just me, it was a lot of people that want to have integrity and want to have truth and justice in the world. I don't want to call them the government. I want to say the corporations that control the police in your area use that to their advantage, and they box you in because they know you want to be a good person, so they put you in a pin, and then they take advantage of you. And they also taunt you and do a lot of other disrespectful things, because they are ego-based and they care more about public perception than they do about integrity and honor and things that they preach. I'm not going to get into the politics. I'm not going to get into Charlie Kirk. Again, the only thing I can say is, for me, and I'll talk about me, I do my best work whenever I have integrity in my work. Now, integrity in your work and attention to detail may not be what my performance bar is. So like, I do make a lot of really cool woofers. Sometimes there's a glue drip. And for a long time, a lot of people made fun of my glue drips. And I was like, does that really affect the performance? Does that affect the sound? Does that affect the 3-year warranty that I back up these things with? No. So why are you pointing it out? And it's a way to dominate and molest what other products and people that they see in the market, to diminish them and make them seem less valuable. So one of the things that, and God bless them, one of the things that happened whenever I bought out a big chunk of, I don't want to say a chunk of TC Sounds, because Scott Atwell of Phi and RE, he's the one that bought out a big chunk of TC Sounds. I bought out a very small chunk, but I didn't know Tilo was going to file for bankruptcy. But I remember some of one of the last conversations I had with Tilo on the phone, because he was selling me a bunch of parts that I needed for the Lightning audio motors that I got from Rockford for 99 cents each, or actually $10 each. He was telling me, and he fed into that bullshit about sometimes when you think and have an impression about the quality of a product, and then you find out that China offers something, a lot of people will use the poor reputation of China to make it seem like, and they'll try to leverage that to get more money out of you. So what Tilo did was he told me that the Chinese made TI frame, which is hilarious at this point, because that's where he was getting them from. But I didn't know that. I assumed, and again, this is my assumption, that these frames were somehow made in America, and also the assumption was that if something's made in America, it's better. That is absolutely not true at all. In fact, especially in this market, it's actually the opposite. But I won't get into that right now. But one of the things that Tilo said, though, he says, be careful about buying in China. A lot of times those frames are thinner, and they're not as good a quality. Now, I found out later what he was being very specific about, and this is where he was choosing what to reveal and not what to reveal in a manipulative manner in order to sort of protect his domain and domination in the market. But he was on his way out. He filed for, I don't know if he filed for personal bankruptcy, but TC Sounds had filed for bankruptcy, and this was in 2007. And at the time, they had the lock in on the TI frame because they had paid for the tooling. But he ended up, or TC Sounds, not Tilo, TC Sounds ended up burning what I heard was about $300,000 to China. And so what happens when you do that is China needs to recoup that money over time. And so then what happens is the tool, which is the giant injection device where they inject molten aluminum mixed with zinc into a mold and then eject it, and that's your frame. And there's videos you can watch about how they make this and the process that they do to manufacture that. And so, anyways, the machine work to make the molds, that's what's called tooling. And so he controlled the tooling. He didn't own the tooling. The big manufacturer, which at the time was XY, Zhengyang, which is the largest speaker parts manufacturer in the world, they owned the tooling, and then Tilo controlled the tooling, meaning that he had an agreement with XY that nobody else could produce or buy this frame, the TI frame. And so it became very interesting in the marketplace when TCS filed for bankruptcy. And then one of the things that Scott Atwell bought, which was very keen of him, is he bought a lot of the inventory. Yes. But what he also bought was the patent at the time. And so if you control the patent, it's not quite the tooling agreement. So the control of the tooling, the way that he did it was he bought the patent and then was able to sort of punish the market for anybody that used the TI frame. Because I remember getting it wasn't a cease and desist. It was more like just a complaint because I was using the TI frame. It's that guy. What's his name? He's like a Marshall Mathers type of idiot. I think his name's Marshall. Anyways, he's one of the runts that hangs out with Scott and, sucks Scott's dick and all that kind of stuff and acts like he's a tough guy, or acts like, I think it was the owner of Ascendant Audio. I think that's that guy. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Please correct me. I would love to know the real information on that. But anyways, so Scott had bought the design patent, the ornamental patent for the TI frame, which this particular TI frame, those are the 15s. It's a 6-spoke, and you can look up the original patent that was filed by Tilo on behalf of the corporation TCS, TC Sounds. And so technically in the U.S. market, because it was just a U.S. patent, Scott Atwell was the only one that could import those legally and sell them. And which, again, was a very, very smart move. But what Scott did, and I've told this story a couple times, is one of the problems with the other version of the TI frame, which is the 4-spoke version, which is used on the 12-inch and the 10-inch, is kind of weak. It needs another 2 spokes. And so what Scott did, which was a great investment, is he paid for the tooling to tool up the 6-spoke version of the 12-inch TI frame. And the only reason I call it the TI frame, even though it's the Scott frame, is because you guys know it so well. That goes back to the TC Sounds being the OEM, original equipment manufacturer, for the Eclipse Titanium series woofers, Titanium and Titanium Pro. The OEM for that was TC Sounds. That was all TC Sounds products. Designed and engineered by yours lovely, which was Tilo Stompler. So Scott tooled up the 12-spoke TI frame and then got to decide what bullhole circles he wanted to use, because, again, he was importing it for Phi, and he decided that he wanted to use the 135 millimeter bullhole circle, and then I think if the other pattern is 155. And so, but that's what Scott did in the marketplace, again, to adapt, to help people. The other great thing that he did was his version of the TI frame, which is V2 when you look at lower to base on where it was sold. And again, the only difference between that is that they use a different opening on the bottom, the neck, which is a little wider. And then they use a 135 bolt hole circle, which is within the windows. And then in the spoke part, they use the 155. So, and that's what Scott wanted. And so that Scott basically came out with his version. And the new version is not made by XY, which was the original manufacturer, factory in China that was making these frames. So again, not a big deal. I just wanted to share those stories with you in a way that helps you be a better, Again, I don't like to use the word business, but like a businessman, because you can run a private business. And again, what we talked about was there are other ways to function in the marketplace other than being a business and other than being involved in commerce. Yeah, that's all I'm going to say on that right now. But I love you guys, and I got some more deals with this week, and I look forward to our live stream tonight at 6 p.m. This video is 50 minutes of just sales talk and stories, but I get a lot of response from you guys that these are valuable to you, and I appreciate that. Again, I don't like doing a lot of the marketing and other clickbait that I see on YouTube, and I hope that you appreciate this. I'm actually going to be starting other channels, and I hope you support those. Some of those are going to serve as backups, because what I realized when the government or the government representatives, the corporation representatives that were prosecuting me, were actually trolling me and trolling the YouTube channel. And I realized how vulnerable it was to just have one channel. And I don't want to have that. I want to be able to have a reach and a network to communicate with you guys, not only so that I can survive and get my message out, but also just as again, a precautionary backup. Any kind of Instagram prostitute, sex worker that you see will often have at least one, if not two, backup accounts. Because sometimes people get flagged. Sometimes there's a miscommunication. Sometimes the organization like Instagram or YouTube or whoever it is has a political reason for muting you or holding your account ransom. It's again, that's the knife in Call of Duty. I don't recommend that kinds of dealings, but it happens. And so it's important to be prepared for that. Lastly, it was interesting to hear the audio legend Curtis Navarro's take on what went down to put me in prison. And I really just wanted kind of his opinion about how he saw it. And of course, he would have handled the whole thing different. If I could do it again, I probably would have handled it different. But again, I don't control that now. And I want to look at all the positive things that came out of it. And I want to really just move on and have a lesson learned about it. And again, share those lessons with you guys so that you can avoid those mistakes. Because really, that's what humans are good at, is storytelling and remembering stories. And the reason we're good at that is because that helps our evolutionary insights in order to avoid bad situations, bad people, bad things that don't allow you to be productive. And it is my belief that being productive, both financially, leads to being productive physically, which is, having children or taking care of children and raising families and things like that. And really, and that's, if you look at it from a very macro view, that's the Lord's work. So remember, we're just here to make peace, make babies, make peace. That's the life lasagna. Lots and lots of layers. So peace, babies, peace, babies, peace, babies. And that's it. That's all we're here for. So all of this stuff that looks like it's delicious money and things like that, it's not. I'm not looking at it like that. I'm looking at it as survival and to be able to stay at home and work in the air conditioning and not have to do a shitty job for shitty people that I don't like, which is what a lot of you guys have to suffer through, either because your family didn't step out of that lifestyle, didn't teach you how to do without a job. And again, this is not something that I want for you. I simply want to put it out there for people that want an alternative to employment. And we'll talk more about that, but I'm getting excited about the live stream. I got a lot of work to do. This is, we were doing some change sorting mostly because the $1,000 in copper Josh had picked up, and then in the storage, I guess some water got in there and killed the bottoms of the the boxes that were holding the pennies, and so now we have a trash bag full of pennies. And I was like, all right, babe, we might as well get it. This came with the house, and so we ended up using this as a piggy bank, and we emptied everything out. And I was like, all right, let's go ahead and use this. Because again, the money doesn't do you any good sitting in the bank. It doesn't do you any good sitting in a place, especially change. And so we have separated this. This is all the zinc pennies. These are basically useless. They're only worth a penny. We have a little stash of copper that we had found, and these are 1982 or older. And then what Sherry's going to do is go through these. You look up on the internet to see if there's anything that's like super value, like if there's it's 1 year of a penny that is worth $20,000. You're going to pull that out and look at it again. Do your market research, and then what you want to do is come in about 10-15% below market. You make a quick sale and you move on. That's it. You don't take it personal. Don't be attached to any of this stuff. It doesn't matter if it's Rockford Fosgate or whatever. Don't be attached to it. Now, what's funny is the market price right now is only about $80 each on these. I think they're actually worth more than that. So I may end up using them on the test bench because, again, it's a good little amplifier. It's a good little 200-watt amplifier. And I think it's actually worth more. And I may wait for some other market things. I don't want to project or talk about things that I want to do because, again, I don't want to show my hand. So I can omit some things that help to my advantage, but then later I'll tell you what really happened. And I think that's okay. That's a good compromise on my integrity. Because again, I don't want to be perfect. I don't want to be godlike. I don't want to be the base Jesus. I just want to be a regular guy that's had a lot of ups and downs in this particular arena. And I want to share my experience with you so that you can learn from it. And hopefully, again, do the most important thing, which is be productive. And the most efficient way for you to be productive is to be your own boss. And so that way you connect directly with the person paying, which is the buyer. And if you can short circuit that, you can make way more money and also offer your product at a discount to the market. And then so that way the buyer actually gets a good deal as well. So, but if you are just an employee, you're just a cog in a big machine that usually creates a lot of waste and a lot of fluff. And what it does is it slaves the employees and the corporation and the people that control the corporation. It creates a vacuum as a way to extract wealth out of the population at the expense of their suffering. Not really a fan of that. And there are some alternatives, like, communism, labor unions and things like that. But I'll get into that later. But anyways, I wanted to share that. And then, so we separate that. We separate the nickels. I think it's only like a 1943 nickel that's worth anything. And I think it's like a bigger percentage of silver. Dimes are really easy to do. You just look at the profile to find the silver ones. The silver ones were made in 64 or older. And those used to be a good thing to find in the circulation. Not really so much anymore. The ones that we rolled, these are the ones that were 100% copper, and we went ahead and rolled them in that case. And then I'll roll these separate so that we can put them back into circulation. Your money doesn't do you any good sitting as money. Now, if you use your money to buy an asset, right? Like, was it not yesterday? It was the day before, Friday. These are Satterberg. Is some audiophile brand of subwoofer. And what's really great is that they use the same termination panel and the same cabinet that they also sell a 3-way in or a 2-way. But this version, they just used it as a cutout for a big subwoofer. And I picked these up. I picked up the pair for $50. And because one of the corners is smashed in, but I thought they would make great just enclosures for somebody that's on a budget. I could swap out the woofers. I could do a video on the woofers. There's all kinds of ways that I could split this into to being productive. And your money invested in something like this, especially at the buy price, right? So I did $25 each. Even if I sold them as is after doing the videos on them, I think market price would still be about $300, $350 for the pair, which I think is still a really good margin. If I wanted to just do that, the problem is that this brand is not very popular. I've never heard of it, and this is, I'm in this industry for a living, and so it might be helpful to sort of do an in between, which is where I pull apart the thing, show you the driver, maybe do the driver specs, look at the crossover. That it actually has a passive crossover on the other side of that panel, I'm assuming. And we do a video on that and show you how to sort of hype these up or make them better, things like that, and or even sell them for parts. That's another way to go. And then put them back together and then sit on them for no more than about 2 or 3 months to see if they sell to a local buyer as is, the way they are. I think they're actually worth more as parts, but we'll talk about that later in another video. And so again, the whole purpose of this, not only this video, but all of the videos, is number one, education. I want to teach you guys how to be better humans, to be more productive in our society, because that's the Lord's work, our Lord GONZO. And he does want you to shoot the creamiest loads you can to make all the family you can and support them. And again, create peace, create children, peace, children. But also I want you to think different. So in the public schooling system, and typically, my poor ass parents who came from a background of long line of drunk hillbillies, I want to be able to break that chain and do something different. And this is the way you do it. You share stories, you share technology. And for a lot of people, this is technology, right? This is a really great device that cost about $10 each to make. And then they sold for, $300-$400 each. It was crazy. So, but again, right now, market price on these is about $80 each. I don't want to sell them for that. I want to sell them for more to a collector, someone that has an emotional bond to the nostalgia and wants to nurse that. They're not ready to let that go yet. And so, to me, some people might say I'm taking advantage of their nostalgia, and I am. Absolutely, I am. But that's their delusion. And so if they want to believe that there's more value, I can agree with that. And also what it does is sometimes it can create a bond, especially, again, if market price is like a real market price for these, I think would be about $150 each. And so if real market price is $150 each, and then I come in at about $130, maybe even $125 for the pair, like $250 for the pair, the buyer's going to be happy. I'm going to be happy because I got a great return on investment. We're both happy. And then it also stuck it to the guys that act like this is God's famunda. It's not God's famunda. It's just an amplifier. And also what that tells me is like that little link that goes in between, typically market price that I've seen in the past 20 years has been about $100 each for those links, right? I think that's a really crazy price for those, but they are very rare and it's a collector's item. But again, it's something that was manufactured in a factory. So I don't think it should be rare like that. So, but that might present an opportunity for somebody, I don't know, to buy one for $100, $200, whatever it is, send it to China, get it knocked off, and then bring it to market for about $80 each. What do you think about them apples? Yeah. And the ornamental patent on these has expired long time ago. What do you think of that? So, and typically you want to find a very small foundry, typically a guy working with a dirt floor out of his house, or a very, very small factory that uses dirt floors, that doesn't give a shit who Rockford Fosgate is. And that the god that is Rockford Fosgate, that is owned by some Australian construction company now, says that if you make knockoff parts, we're going to not use you and punish you. So again, that's some other bullshit. So what you're looking for is other independent spirits on the other side of the world that can do this work and create a product that everybody loves. And if you do that for everything, that's what the worldwide revolution of Robot Underground is. And that's why I use that logo. I'll get more into that stuff later. But again, I'm feeling the love. I love you guys. This is something that you can do from home. and that's the cheapest overhead that you had is that you have, because it's something that you're already paying for. And like Robert Kiyosaki says, the most valuable real estate that you own is between your ears. So enhance it, monetize it, use it to your advantage. That's all knowledge. That's all information. It's all other people's experience, which is what a story is, other people's experience passed on to you. So we'll talk to you later tonight, 6 p.m. Arizona time. And we'll be open for Q&A or just hanging out and talking about stereo stuff. Love you guys.